Listeners, welcome back to Fantastic, where Christine and I are going to offer up your latest masterclass to master CAS. And today's topic is pretty cool. We're talking about non-negotiables and building a CAS practice, but kind of at the 11th hour, we decided that we are going to, we were inspired by the very popular show, The Bear, which most of you have probably heard of. If you haven't, you can watch it on Hulu and I believe also Netflix. Stars one of my favorite actors of all times, Jeremy Allen White. Christine, you're a big fan too. So I'm super excited to talk about non-negotiables in reference to the bear.
I'm so excited because I just got so sucked into it the other night. And I was like, these are all like still CAS principles, right? Like, and you can really take them into any part of your life. But I don't know. I was just so in my head. I was like, let's do this. And you're like,
Yeah,
it's my favorite show. And I'm like, oh, fantastic.
it is. It's one of my favorite shows. And what I love about it is that it's it's so chaotic. It's almost cathartic. When I watch it, it's like binge watching about 100 panic attacks. Like, it's the best way that I can describe that show. Um, and I can't get enough of the tension and anxiety because ultimately it leads to something beautiful, whether that's a creation of something new or that's human connection. It's just absolutely amazing. So let's dig in, comparing our non-negotiables to the bear. This is going to be fun. And this is pretty much impromptu. Like, we don't really have a script for this. So this is awesome. So the first non-negotiable that we came up with is the pursuit of excellence. So what insight do you have on the pursuit of excellence and building a CAS practice as we compare it to the bear?
Absolutely. So, like, but when we talk about the bear and really what it means psychologically, because I feel like all of the non-negotiables are, these goals and these like has some deeper meaning to it, right? But in the show, it's what makes the main character, who's Carmi, which I'm sure we're going to reference a lot in this. It's what makes him stand out, but it's also what keeps him from growing and creating buy-in from his fellow chefs in the kitchen. And so I just feel like that is just translates again into CAS, right? And what does that look like when we're trying to build this CAS team and CAS tech stack and all of the things that go with that? And, what's that pursuit of excellence that we're all chasing, right? And so with that, it's like the high personal standards, driving the mastery within CAS, upskilling to advisory, um, but also that perfectionism can isolate leaders and erode buy-in if it's imposed and not co-created. So how are you bringing your team in?
Yeah, I mean, it's just like in the bear. So the pursuit of excellence from the perspective of Carmi, the main character, Jeremy Allen White, it's a pathological pursuit because it's fueled by a lot of his unresolved trauma from the past, which keeps him in this endless loop of perfection, which ironically stalls him from growing and moving forward and allowing the business to grow because he is stuck in that loop and he's doing it on his own. He's creating this chaos and sort of isolation, and then that isolates other people on the team as well. So the pathological pursuit is imposed on the entire restaurant at that point. Um, increases the chaos and decreases the lack of unity, and that is not what you want when you're trying to build a CAS practice where every team member is important and unity is at the core of that.
Right. And though too, I mean, this is the CAS practice, right? There's so much to build and there's so much we consult with a lot of firms on a playbook for their CAS teams because as you're building, are you really documenting all of that? Does your team really have something to follow? Like, are you doing everything in that most standard way that you can? And a lot of firms, I mean, we were one of them, you just kind of like as things come up, you implement a policy for that, and as
Right.
that comes up, you change it or,
Right.
whatever that looks like. So,
Yeah.
I just think it really resonated.
Yeah. Absolutely. So another non-negotiable which tracks right in line with the bear is the one that we call details matter. And you have to be detail oriented to achieve greatness. But again, it has to be as a unified front. And it's in those details where standardization really exists. right? So getting those details right to standardize, which then leads to elevated efficiency. And what does that do? Reduces anxiety because everything is standardized and consistent. So, what else do you have to say about details matter?
I mean, well, in CAS, every detail matters, right? I mean, your clients are relying on their financials, and I always just tell firms too, like they rely on your financials so much. Like if they went to sell their business, and they're going to do, quality of earnings or on your business, is that data and information accurate that you're putting together, that the value of their company that is represented is accurate, right? And so those I- obviously that's extreme, but those details
Yeah.
matter, right? It
Yeah.
matters from investor perspective. It matters from financial institution perspective. And so, in relation to the bear, right? I mean, their whole objective is to get a Michelin star, and so what does that Michelin star look like in the accounting world? And I think that a lot of that is trust. And, that comes with referrals as clients trust you and know that, you do good work.
I think a good example, another good example of details matter in the bear is the pastry chef Marcus. You watch him build these amazing pastries, these desserts, and the slightest little detail in terms of even the ridging, maybe in like the small cake, has to be aligned and has to be equal. And then the placement of the sliver of almond has to be precise. I mean, that is just like one of the best examples. And where does that lead him? Where does that precision lead him? It leads him to making Food and Wine's list of next chef to watch. So it's
Right?
another great example. Like the more detail oriented practices can get, and standardization coming from that, I mean, the faster they're going to grow, and keep
Exactly.
team members too, right? The
Right.
team members
Right.
love standardization. They love consistency.
Well, right. And they don't want to, yeah, it can't be the one offs, right? And they can't be trying to figure things out on the fly as they go. Absolutely.
All right, so I love this next one, and these were your words, not mine, which is shocking. Know your shit, and I love saying it. I'm going to say it 5 more times, but it's so true. Like you have to know your shit, and not just the cast leaders, but the entire team, because there is nothing more confidence shattering than faking it till you make it. Like constantly building that airplane while it's in flight is a horrible feeling. So encouraging staff to hone their skills and then helping them do that is really important. So, what do you have to say about know your shits?
That's funny. Yeah, no, but and I want to say this directly came from, the Bears non-negotiable list. So not my words, but because we're trying to create CAS experts, right? We're trying to upskill them. We're trying to teach them advisory. And, this is what we're trying to do with Infinite Ties with our 12-month staff senior training track is, do they have the tools? And what does that training look like for them? Because, in the CAS space, again, everything's generally just so geared towards tax and audit. And so giving them this space where they can really take the technical skill set and apply into the clients in a CAS way, in an advisory way, I think is just really important. So to me, it's telling the firms, invest in your people, right? And really, like you said, just hone their skills.
Yeah, and in the Bear, they did that in the beginning. So when they opened up, when they remodeled the restaurant, so it was a very high end restaurant. It was no longer just the Chicago beef. They sent Marcus and they sent, I believe, the sous chef T. They sent them overseas to be trained. So they deeply invested in their staff in order for them to come back and contribute in the best way that they possibly could. So
Exactly.
I can't I can't begin to overstate the importance of investing in your staff and not just in training. I think mentoring is also really important to mention here, but mentoring in the right way where it's authentic and it's confidence building. And another really good episode of The Bear was season 3, episode 10. And I have this memorized because Thomas Keller, a real life chef, made a guest appearance on the show. And it was the scene where Carmi was still at the French Laundry being trained. and he had been tasked with trussing all these chickens in a procedure called the Pope's nose. And if anyone had seen the show earlier, an earlier chef, his approach was to attack and berate Carmi. But Thomas Keller comes in. He comes in with empathy and storytelling. So he immediately starts talking to Carmi about when he started. He says, "Oh, I see they've tasked you with poke nosing all of the chickens. I get it. I've been there." And that immediately creates trust and a connection. And then from there, he goes into storytelling. So as he's showing him how to trust the chicken to secure the Pope's nose, he's telling him the origin of where the term Pope's nose came from. And you can just see the connection forming. And
Right.
immediately, Carmi understands because it was
The
through a
light
lens of
bulb. Yeah.
storytelling and empathy. And I think that's what a lot of leaders should be honing in on as well, is creating a level of empathy and mentoring through storytelling to really move people forward. So I just thought that was an example from the bear we could not pass up.
I love that. I love that I love that
Yeah.
perception and concept because It's it's when the light bulb goes on and you know when and it's really taking the time, but, in addition to this, though, I think it was allowing the space, like you said, they sent them overseas, you know,
Hmm.
but that
Yeah.
meant that they weren't working at the restaurant. They weren't, so
Right.
how does that translate to CAS? A lot of times we're still giving them too many budgeted billable hours,
Hmm.
instead of really investing in them with the time that it takes for them to absorb that training and information and apply it.
Yeah, bottom line, an investment up front in your staff is gonna pay off big dividends in the end. Just period.
Exactly.
Period. And
Period.
I think a lot of really good leaders know that. All right, another non-negotiable is focus. What do you have to say about focus in the workplace, in the CAS practice?
I think this one is I what comes to mind for me is the pick up put down with clients, right? And so when you get into the focus of do you have, and this translates to a lot of different of the non-negotiables on the list that we won't get into today, but it's like, do you have everything ready? Do you have everything from the client in order to take it from start to finish as much as possible?
The next non-negotiable is service, and this one seems like a no-brainer. Obviously, you want to deliver really good service, but we're getting a little deeper here, and we're talking about this thing we call relationship memory. And so, for those who have watched The Bear and don't remember, in season 4, episode 3, Richie, who's Carmi Berzado's cousin, and sort of nemesis, but they love each other. He's the front of house manager, and his job is to know everything about the clients. So not only can they deliver good service, but they can also be proactive in delivering what the client didn't expect at all. And in that particular episode, there's a little girl, her family saved up. Her dream was to go to the Bear during snow in Chicago. And they didn't have snow. So Richie engineered an outdoor scene where he brought in a snow machine and made the little girl's dream come true. He knew all about her and her family before they even came in to set up this amazing, memorable client experience. So,
Right.
what a great example of personalized service. In terms of CAS, what does that mean to you?
Every client is treated with the utmost care, right? And what do you know personally about your clients and what are you tracking and how's your daughter in college? How's your dog? Whatever it is, how was your trip? I know you went on a trip and making it that personal. But what I liked about that too, when you think about CAS, is they had like the food critic coming in and they're like, what are we going to do different? And they said, absolutely nothing. And so, like, when I just kept thinking about that from like a service, like a client service perspective,
Yeah,
I'm like, wow, nothing changes. Nothing changes when the food critic comes in, which tells
right.
you that you're operating at the utmost highest level of service. And
Yes,
I don't know, I just really
personalization is part of the everyday language. Getting to know clients on a deeper level is part of the everyday culture, and that is what's really key and what I pulled from that particular episode of The Bear.
yeah, yep, yep, yep. Love it.
Loved, love it. Create those service memories. Create those service memories that just further, like, enhance that stickiness that you already have with your client. So their loyalty builds, they trust you even more, and they're not going anywhere.
But isn't that, though, too, the relationship? That's what AI can never replace, right?
Never. No.
Never. Like
No.
it, and so, what personable relationship, if they like you, they're gonna stay with you longer too, right? I mean, so there it goes from like client service, but really being personable and creating that relationship.
Well, and I've always said too, AI is not here to eliminate, it's here to elevate. So AI has its place, but CAS expertise is required, and quite frankly, the most obvious ingredient being human connection. People are always
Right.
going to crave human connection. They don't want to talk to a bot about predictions and cash flow forecasting. So it's a really good distinction to make. I'm glad you brought up AI on this one. Yeah,
Yes.
awesome.
Love it.
Um, you've got time listed in here too as a non-negotiable. What are you thinking about time?
When you from a CAS perspective, that every second counts, right? That's what they say in the show, like every second counts. And so it's
Yeah,
really, I always talk about highest and best use. And so where are you utilizing your team? Are they doing the right things at the right level? Um, that's creating that space for them to grow. And it also veers into that, pick up, put down. So if you're not prepared and you're not ready, and that's all of those seconds that you just wasted because you didn't, have everything in line, you just lost time, right? So it's really how can you be efficient?
yeah, yeah. I mean, and that's just the common language in a firm anyway. It is all about efficiency because time is money. It's why we have value pricing and hopefully the billable hour eventually goes out. So you always do have to have a focus on time. And, in the bear, like you said, they had that sign prominently placed that said every second counts. And while the wording in and of itself is almost kind of chaotic and induces stress because it's a reminder, it was also a unified message. So everyone was aware that every second counted in terms of delivering the best product. So they all, even though every second counts, you might feel pressure from that. If it's on a unified front, it makes more sense. And I think that's what I would want leaders and cast teams to hear from this. Um, just it's not time for the sake of time. It's time for the sake of that pursuit of excellence and lowering anxiety, right? Because if you've got an eye on time, you're not going to get scope creep and all those things that we've talked about in past episodes.
Exactly. Love it. I totally agree with you.
All right, you've got one on here. I also love it's not about you, it's the client first. And we kind of already talked about this in terms of like making the client experience richer where you can, really understanding your client, um, creating standardized processes that really the value flows down to the client when you're super organized and consistent and things are standardized within a CAS practice. But what more do you have to say on this non-negotiable? Not about you.
What comes to mind though too is, are you listening? Are you
Oh, I love
listening to
that.
your
Yeah.
client? Right? Like, are you hearing what they're saying? Are you listening to the cues? Because that, all of the listening skills and what they're saying feeds right into advisory. Or are you just kind of like presenting and talking at them where you're not picking up their cues? So I think it's a very, very fine balance of the listening to make your client feel heard and seen and that they're first.
Yeah, and I think there's an element of empathy that we need to spotlight here as well. So listening to clients from like the business perspective obviously is important, like their goals, their visions, what they want for the future, but also listening for those emotional cues and having
Right.
empathy for that because your clients are going to have stress. They're going to worry about the future. So I think that's an important element to talk about too, as a non-negotiable is not forgetting about empathy when it comes to client relationships.
Absolutely. 100%. And that the empathy comes from listening though, right? I mean, yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with you too.
Yeah, and listening to understand. So there's 2 types of listening. I think I've talked about this before too. Listening to respond, where you're just waiting for me to shut up so you can start talking, and then listening to understand, which is that truly focused listening. You're listening to your client to gain a deeper understanding so that you can help them further and elevate the service that you deliver. That's a distinction that people really, really need to understand.
Couldn't agree more. And don't you always know on the other side when people are listening to respond?
Always, yeah. I mean, look at Carmy, when he was so focused, on changing the menu every day, and his right-hand woman was telling him, "This is not the way to do it, it's too chaotic." He wouldn't listen to anybody. It was his way or the highway. He never listened to her to understand, he listened to respond, and he was waiting to respond with a no. And it was very evident, and when he started listening to understand, that's when things really started to evolve. Let's talk about pushing boundaries. I think this should always be a non-negotiable because to me, pushing boundaries with guardrails, I get it, but it's always about being innovative and creative. You know, Alan Whitman, who's a thought leader out there, the break the mold strategy, he's always saying, like, "Don't rest on your laurels." Like, always be looking for the next new way to better serve your clients, to help the company grow and to scale, and so pushing boundaries should be woven into the fabric of your culture and encouraging that level of innovation across your team. And I think that's also what happened in The Bear, especially in that scene at the French Laundry where you had the empathy and the storytelling. He was really also helping Carmy to push his boundaries. And then Carmy did the same thing with his chefs, once they had that breakthrough and understanding.
Yep. And yeah, and in the CAS space, what this like translates to me is, everything is constantly changing with technology, right? And so you're constantly having to be creative. You're constantly having to learn something new. Even though you know technically what you're doing, you're still learning some new software, new skill set with technology. And so that's how it translates to me with tech, right? It's creativity, it's bringing those people in, it's creating those tech champions. How are you motivating them? But also within, I love this though, within the guardrails, because
Mhm.
it like, from the show, to me, what it was saying was it's pushing the boundaries is fine as long as it does not compromise one's mental well being and
Yeah,
creativity.
right.
So, what governance do you have within your CAS policies and procedures that gives them those rails, and also mitigates risk for the firm too, right? Because obviously that's where, you have to protect the firm as well.
Yeah, but I truly believe also pushing innovation across the whole team brings them into the process even more. It's giving other staff members permission to also be creative and come forward with new ideas. And that's how you build a successful cast team when everybody's on board with always making things better.
Exactly. Exactly. And again, with the guardrails, because with those
Sure.
guardrails, it's not counterproductive, right? Because it should be everybody's on the same page. Everyone feels safe with
Yeah.
that creativity. Yeah.
Right. Right. Exactly. This next one's probably my favorite because I'm an OCD clean freak, but clean as you go. I mean, anybody who's ever watched a documentary or any of the chef shows, chefs are very OCD. As they're creating, they're cleaning because they believe in a clean, organized workspace leads to a better product. So that was obvious in the bear too. If you looked, everything was labeled, there was precision all over the place. That kitchen was spotless by the time they left. And it was always neat and organized as they were working. So clean as you go, how does that relate to cast practices?
To me, it's about, your organizational skill set daily, right? What does that look like? It's not creating chaos. It's preventing fires that come up on a daily basis. And I think it exudes professionalism when the clients, are calling or they have a question, and this really, as far as clean as you go, I think the organization allows you to be proactive, because you just everything's just run like a tight ship, and everything's the financials have good hygiene, they're clean, they're accurate. all of the things, can you code and do those things daily, weekly, so that it doesn't create that sense of either unprofessionalism or disorganization.
Yeah, and I think the goal should always be making sure the kitchen is clean. So even when you think down to just closing out tasks, making sure that you're updating things with status updates and notes so that there are no orphan artifacts. I mean, that just leads to chaos too. That's a good representation of cleaning as you go, that thoroughness of updating and closing out tasks when required. Break down the boxes is the next non-negotiable. And this is about, I mean, this is about waste discipline in my mind. I mean, you constantly saw them in the bear breaking down the boxes to reduce and recycle. But to me, this is make sure you keeping an eye constantly on areas of waste. Are you spending too much time on this task? Are you having a higher level leader maybe do repetitive tasks when they should be focused on higher advisory work? Like, what's your take?
I think it's efficiencies, right? So we keep asking CAS teams to push work to technology, push work down, but and to gain efficiencies, which is the right thing to do, but also creating that again safe space to be able to do that. So how
Yeah.
are we increasing margins? How are we reducing costs? Um, and in the bear, it was we reduce costs because we break down the boxes and then we don't have to pay the trash company as much. So how that translates into firms and into CAS is, what is just noise and what's just creating um, just increased expenses that's maybe unnecessary.
Yeah. Yeah. Technique is the next one you have on here. We have others on here like confidence and competence. I think we've covered those at this point and how to get there in a cast practice. But what do you have to say about technique, which reminds me of location?
To me, this still goes back to like the upskilling, right? What that muscle memory is. And, as we're training and upskilling CAS professionals, are they able to take that and apply it to any client because they understand the concept and they understand
Yeah.
the application of it and they know when to utilize that? Or is it just really that, textbook knowledge of not knowing how and when to apply that to clients. So the technique itself is giving them the opportunity. I know we've talked to this and about this in prior podcasts, but Michelle and I, when we go and we consult with firms, it's about experience versus exposure. Like you might have learned it and you might know the concept, but have you been given the exposure to utilize that, to have that muscle memory, to create those, that mastering the technique?
And that goes back to standardization. So advisory is this a classic example of the ability to apply standardization. If you think about verticals, if you've cornered the dental market, then you have all the information you need to apply across clients. It almost becomes, not to oversimplify, but an off the shelf product. So you're not advising clients differently for each client that comes through the door. That creates chaos amongst your staff as well. So when I think about, what you just said, it goes back to standardization as well. And there's a feeling of confidence and calm in standardization because you know what's coming and what you have to do.
Exactly. And it's really just a plug and play, right? Yeah. You don't have to think about it. You don't have to create new techniques because you've mastered what you know.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, we sort of already talked about this, but you do have, I want to mention it because it's so relatable to the bear. It's to change the menu every day. We know that created chaos for Carmi. It was too much. They didn't allow them time to grasp or master any one dish and for that dish to become notable. And in the case of CAS, it would be for that service to become notable. So when we talk about changing the menu every day, I think what we're really talking about is don't 86 reinvention because there's always ways to improve on process or patterns or techniques at any point. Doesn't mean they're non-standardized, it just means you're improving upon them. Is that I mean, is that a true statement?
Yeah, I think it's that fine balance, right? It's like, what are you in CAS, things change so quickly. So what do what's changing quickly, but also not changing too much too often, right? And so it's such a fine balance within CAS, especially with the various vendors and tech stack and all of the products that are out there. It's trying to be cutting edge without being too cutting edge, and trying to master products without disrupting your team and a learning curve on a regular basis.
Yeah, I mean, the next non-negotiable, which really ties directly into this, there's overlap. And the last one we're going to talk about today is constantly evolve. And you've got sustainability and parens here. So, what can you add on about this non-negotiable, constantly evolving in terms of CAS?
Um, so constant same. Say I
Yeah,
do feel like this feeds into everything that we kind of talked about too, is that CAS is constantly evolving and firms are just really looking into how can we be more advisory with clients? How can we incorporate AI? How can we incorporate all these things like you said that's really enhancing? Are we becoming this proactive storyteller to these clients where that there's value in that, right? Because the story is where the value is. What their financials, are always historical, right? But can you take that and can you create that, how they can evolve just as a business? And I think there's a lot of happiness that goes into that with CAS teams. Like when you're able to actually help your clients evolve too, I think it's just fun. It's a passion that people I think love in this space.
and it becomes a motivating factor too to always see your clients succeed. And so that reinvention and constantly evolving intrinsically, it triggers motivation through purpose over pressure. And I think that's really important to note here as well through progress and purpose.
Yeah. Yeah, I love this. So, I would just say too, with all of these and the ones that I mean, we just grabbed, some of them, but
Yeah.
there's a list. And in the episode I was watching the other night, the list is like 25 long, but
Yeah.
it's like, how can you take those and how can you really incorporate those into your practice, right? And once you identify what those are, I love this. One of them that's on the list is do not negotiate the non negotiables,
Right.
right?
Yes. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so,
Don't compromise on your standards, is really what you're saying there. Um, you have non-negotiables in place for a reason, so don't negotiate on those. If you've got a standardized process that's working great, let it keep working until you can find a valuable improvement to make to that. If you've got a service package that's working and the clients are happy, always be thinking in the back of your mind how to make it better. But stick with that if it's working and the clients are responding well to it and you're making a profit. So yeah, and don't negotiate on your non-negotiables. I hear you 100%.
yeah, yeah, I love it. I love it.
That's a long list, and really, really good stuff, and I'm hoping a lot of this resonated through the examples in comparison to the bear. I can't imagine many listeners haven't seen at least one episode, but, maybe if you haven't, we've enticed you to go binge watch it. Remember what I said, though, it's like binge watching 100 panic attacks. So, it's such a good moving series. But man, like in the cinematography and the acting and the framing, they just bake in tension and chaos. So you really feel like you're in that kitchen.
Well, and it's taking the dysfunction into function, right? Like
Yeah.
that's what they
Yes.
do. And so, I feel like as, early adopters in CAS, everything feels so scattered and on an island and
Yeah.
dysfunctional. And so to me, what just kept resonating is how do we take that dysfunction and create alignment and create standardization and create our non-negotiables and create that elevated service, client service that is just, the key and the core of CAS.
Which is the exact storyline of the bear. It's taking the dysfunction from the dysfunctional families to dysfunctional team of chefs to this dysfunctional business and really moving that to a place of light and making it functional and workable and a place where people wanted to constantly improve. And that's what I think I love most about the show. And that's what I love about watching cast practices grow and implementing new guidelines and standardized processes, watching them evolve, not only to enrich the client experience, but also to be successful. Because that's what we want for every cast practice, right? We want them to be successful.
Exactly. Exactly. So what a great way to like incorporate that into, the bear into
Yeah.
CAS. So
Yeah, yeah,
that
yeah.
was our
So,
our fabulous idea for today's podcast.
well, it was your fabulous idea. I just jumped on board because I was like all in once I heard the bear. We hope this has resonated with listeners. There's a lot of good tips and tactics to take away from today's episode. And quite frankly, if you liked the format today of comparing it to a popular TV series, like let us know. Like, Christine, maybe we can like do a comparison to Game of Thrones next time. I don't know. I think there's something there with
Right?
dragons, maybe. Yeah.
Right.
Khaleesi and the dragons. I can make that work. Make that work.
I love
Well,
it. I love it.
thank you for tuning in once again. We do try every week to make this your master class to master cast. That is our promise to you, and this is fantastic.